What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Martin, the lead designer, and I'm back with another devlog. In this devlog, I want to talk about what we've been up to in regards to the weapons, kind of bring you up to speed on that, and also discuss what else remains to be done on them. And for those purposes, I've come here to the racetrack, which we can't really see all that well because it's foggy. But if I open up the paper map, you'll see that I am indeed at the racetrack. And I've come here to the racetrack because if I zoom out here, you'll notice that the racetrack is actually one of the furthest points away from the middle of the map, which is not here where you might think it is, but it's actually all the way here in the top right corner. And the reason for that is because what you're seeing right now is not the entire map. There are actually two more segments on top of this and one on the right side which contain the larger island. But since the larger island is not going to be included in the initial early access release, we decided not to include it on this map either to avoid confusing people. So remember, the middle of the map is here and it's not here. So if I close the paper map, in the top left corner you'll see it says distance from map center, which is about 12.5 kilometers, about 12.5 kilometers. So remember, the middle isn't here, it's here. So the distance between here and my position at the racetrack is 12.5 kilometers. Now, if you know anything about game engines, you'll know that most of them use 32-bit floating point numbers for the coordinates of everything, and that's a huge problem when dealing with large maps such as Taviana, because the further away you move from the middle of the map, the less accurate those floating point numbers become, and hence the less accurate your coordinates become, which leads to things shaking, jittering, and everything kind of falling apart, which I'm going to demonstrate to you right now. Alright, so this is what it looked like before. Keep your eye on the weapon and scope. And as I move my mouse around here, you'll notice that everything is shaking very violently. And this is obviously not something that we could release to the public, so this was an issue that we had to deal with first before we do anything else on the weapons. So I've changed locations now. I'm about 6 kilometers away from the middle of the map as opposed to 12.5 before, and if I move my mouse, you'll notice that things don't shake quite as much as they did before. And that's because we're closer to the middle of the map and our floating point numbers are more accurate. But this is still nowhere near good enough for us, so we had to come up with a fix. And I'm back at our original position at the racetrack, which is 12.5 kilometers away from the middle of the map. And now if I move my mouse, as you can see, there is no shaking at all. Well, actually it is shaking ever so slightly, but the camera has to be really close to the weapon for you to notice it. I'll show you that when we talk about attachments. And by the way, there is kind of a bug that we need to fix, and that is if I turn on my head-mounted flashlight, as you can see, the light affects the weapon and we're getting this blinding glare coming off of it, which is not good. So let's talk attachments. As you can see, I'm holding a weapon here which has no attachments installed on it whatsoever. And if I go into the inventory, there it is in primary weapon slot number 1, and if I hover my mouse over it, we can see a description of the weapon, some properties such as the accuracy, damage, rate of fire, and so on, and also the compatible ammo. And we've also got these blue diamonds here, which represent the types of attachments that this weapon supports and their approximate locations. So for example, this weapon supports nozzle attachments, underbarrel attachments, magazine attachments, optic attachments or scopes, and stock attachments. Now keep in mind that the types of attachments that a weapon supports is unique to each weapon, so if I change weapons, it may have more or less attachments. I'll demonstrate that to you now. Let me go into the cheat menu and let's change weapons. Let's choose, I don't know, the Schmeisser for example. And let's press number 2 to draw it. Check out the bar, by the way, that we added at the bottom. And there it is. Ja, das ist wunderbar, die Schmeisser. And if I go back into the inventory, there's my Schmeisser, and as you can see, the Schmeisser only supports magazine attachments and stock attachments. So let's change weapons again and draw the ATM-65 again. There we have it. There's the ATM65. And let's add an attachment to it. Let's add a nozzle attachment. Let's add a silencer, for example. There we go. And as you can see, we've added a silencer to it. Now, if I open up the inventory again, as we can see, we now have a silencer installed on the nozzle of the weapon. So if I hover my mouse on the nozzle diamond, we can see a description of the attachment that's installed on the nozzle, in this case the silencer. We see a description of it again, and we see a property which says damage minus 40%, meaning that it reduces the damage that a weapon deals by 40%. So if I hover my mouse over the weapon again, we now see that it says installed attachments, silencer, just to make it easier to tell which attachments are installed. And in the properties, we can see that the damage now says 36 as opposed to 60 as it was before. And we also see that a portion of the bar is now red, telling us or letting us know that the damage that the weapon now deals is much less than the default because we've installed the silencer, which reduced it by 40%. So let's add another attachment. This time we'll add a stock, and let's say the marksman stock. Close that. There's the marksman stock. And if I open up the inventory, sure enough, there's our marksman stock, which improves our accuracy by 30% and reduces our recoil also by 30%. So if I hover my mouse cursor over the weapon again, sure enough, our accuracy has increased and our recoil has decreased. And if you're wondering what those lines and dashes are on the colored bars, well, those are aids for colorblind people who are not able to tell apart red and green. This was an excellent suggestion by a user on our Discord server. Thank you very much for that suggestion, and if you're interested in joining, you'll find the link in the description box below. So let's add the scope attachment, and this is what the iron sights look like without the scope, by the way. Let me go back into the cheat menu, optics, and we'll add a scope. There we go. There's the scope. And this is what it looks like. We'll talk about scopes a little bit later in the video, by the way. And let's max out the weapon. Let's add a magazine. This is the classic 30 round magazine. Let's add a big old 100 round magazine. There we go. Kind of like a machine gun now. Another nice feature that we have is that if you have a weapon with attachments installed like this one, as you can see, it has a magazine attachment, a stock attachment, and a scope attachment. If I were to drop it on the ground, it will appear on the ground with all the attachments, which is something that many games out there don't have, and it's very annoying because if you find a weapon, you have no way of knowing what attachments it has until you pick it up and equip it. I'm not sure why that's the case because this is very easy to implement, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and drop the weapon and see what it looks like. Let me close the inventory, and as you can see on the ground, the weapon has appeared with the stock, with the scope, and the magazine. And if I were to pick it up and open up the inventory, as we can see, it has all the attachments. So let's talk about scopes. There are currently 3 methods of implementing scopes in video games, and we need to choose one of them before we continue. Method number 1 is this: a simple image overlay. It's cheap, it's effective, and it's very old school. But you know what? Counter-Strike 2.0 still uses it, and it works perfectly fine. And you know what? We really like this method. What do you guys think? And then we've got render targets, which looks like this. And the way it works is there's a camera on the front of the scope, which is rendering the scene onto a texture on the back of the scope. And it uses a whole bunch of video memory. It lags. As you can see, I'm only getting about 25 FPS. There's a lot of ghosting going on, and in general it looks pretty cool, but it's just not very practical. We're not big fans of this method at all. And this is the third and final method, and also our second favorite method. Because just like with the render targets, you get to see the 3D model of the weapon, but unlike with the render targets, it doesn't eat up all your video memory and it doesn't lag, because all we're doing here is moving the camera really close to the weapon model or the scope model. And I know that the sides should be blurred, This is just a quick prototype that we made to see how things work. If we do choose this method, we're going to make it look nice and proper. You're not going to be able to see the inside of the scope or the weapon. Everything is going to look nice and professional. But there is a but to using this method. Remember in the beginning of the video I said that the models do shake ever so slightly if you move the camera really close to the weapon. Well, here we've moved the camera really close to the weapon, and if I move my mouse, you can see that everything is shaking ever so slightly. Now this probably isn't a big deal. We could probably fix this if we do decide to use this method. But we need to make up our mind first so that we don't waste a bunch of time fixing stuff that we might not even use. So let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Join our Discord server, to which you can find the link in the description box. Give us a thumbs up if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and please consider supporting us on patreon.com/TavianaTheOrigins. This project relies on donations and they're really important. And I'll catch you guys next time.